Hey friend, I'm going to tell you a story. Not for revenge, but because I believe some truths are too important to stay buried. Before I start, I'd appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. Eleanor stood at the edge of the grave, the black wool of her suit clinging to her skin. It felt alien, like a second skin she didn't choose, just like the person she was pretending to be. The funeral was too quiet, a silence so profound, it felt like a heavy blanket had been thrown over the world. Not the mournful quiet of grief, but the cold, hollow stillness of a lie. The rain tapped against the green canopy above, a soft, polite sound, as if afraid to interrupt the charade. I imagined Elliot beside me, his voice a low, theatrical whisper in my ear. Can you believe this? Elle, they're bearing a damn empty box. The whole thing is just so them. He would have hated this. He was the louder twin, always the first to talk, the first to fight, the first to laugh at his own absurd jokes. I couldn't picture him going out like this, low voices, tissue boxes, stiff handshakes. It all felt so fake, so forced. Julian, my husband, clutched my hand. His grip was sharp, bordering on painful, and I resisted the urge to pull away. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. It didn't feel like comfort. It felt like a shackle, a silent assertion of ownership. My parents sat right up front, dressed impeccably, as if they were attending a damn shareholders meeting. No red eyes, no tissues, just perfectly ironed clothes and practice frowns. My dad nodded at the priest like they were closing a deal. My mom adjusted her pearl necklace mid-prayer, the click of the beads a tiny, profane interruption in the solemn ceremony. The casket began its slow, mechanical descent, my throat clenched, a knot of dread and sorrow so tight it stole my breath. It was a physical manifestation of a truth I had always, in some corner of my mind, known was coming. My hand reached for my phone without thinking, a reflex born of a lifetime of ignoring boredom or grief. And then, a single buzz, a text from Elliot's number. I'm alive. Don't go back to the house. Don't trust Julian or Mom and Dad. My world went into a slow spin, not a vertigo, but a profound dislocation. The cold, the rain, the muffled sobs, they all became a dull, meaningless hum. Elliot's words were a grenade, and it had just detonated in the hollow space where my heart should have been. My gaze snapped to Julian. His face was a mask of perfectly sculpted grief, but his eyes were searching mine, a flicker of something cold and calculating behind the sorrow. He asked if I was okay, his voice a low murmur, and I knew he wasn't asking out of concern. He was looking for a sign, a crack in my composure, a tell that I had received the message. I faked a dizzy spell, a sudden, overwhelming rush of grief that was half true. I stumbled away from him, muttering something about needing to get some air. The relief of breaking his grip was far greater than it should have been. I didn't drive to the house. I drove to Elliot's apartment, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, my mind replaying every moment of the past 24 hours, and every moment of my life in a new, terrifying light. His apartment was pristine, a museum of a life that never was. Elliot, an artist, a creator, a sculptor of metal and glass, lived in a beautiful mess of canvases, clay, and half-empty coffee mugs. The vibrant smell of turpentine and oil paints was replaced by the acrid sting of bleach. The walls were bare. All his life, all his chaos, all his unique self was gone. My stomach twisted with a new kind of dread. This wasn't a cleanup. This was an erasure. I went to his study, my mind racing through the secret codes only we understood. He had a loose floorboard under his desk, where he kept his most important things. I knelt, my hands shaking, and pried it up. The space was empty. Panic began to set in hot and sharp. Then I saw it, a loose thread in the back of a worn-out chair cushion. I remembered him obsessively fiddling with it, a habit he had since childhood. I pulled the thread, and a small worn-out keychain fell out. It was a replica of a tiny antique ship we'd found as kids, its silver tarnished from years of being carried in his pocket. The ship's mast was a hidden compartment. Inside, a micro SD card. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the cage of my fear. I found his old laptop. It was slow and clunky, a relic he refused to give up because he loved the sound of its old keyboard. I inserted the card and a single file appeared. A video of Elliot. He was thin, his face haggard, with a haunted look in his eyes. He spoke in a low rasp. "Eleanor, if you're watching this, I've either escaped or I'm gone for good. The funeral is a lie. They're chasing me. They'll come for you too if you dig. It's not just Mom and Dad. Julian is part of it. He's not my brother-in-law. He's my handler. My wife, Lauren, was yours. Now she's gone. I found a way to share everything I've collected. All the lies, all the crimes. All of it points back to our family and their company, the Glint Research Corporation. They've been experimenting on people for decades, and we were their most perfect subjects." He went on to explain it all. Everything I'd ever questioned but never dared to speak aloud. The way our parents had always pushed us to excel, to be perfect, the intense surveillance that followed us everywhere, disguised as concerned parenting, our close relationship, our shared dreams, our twin connection. They weren't celebrated. They were studied. They wanted to create a weapon, a perfect soldier with no emotions, no loyalty. They wanted to sever the bond between us to do it. We were not just twins. We were an experiment, a project, Project Echo. And if they couldn't separate us, they were going to erase me and make you think it was your fault. He told me to find his old friend, Maya. She was the only one he trusted. He gave me a coded address, a series of numbers and letters. That would lead me to her. I spent the next 3 days in a fog, bouncing between hotels, a ghost in my own city. I avoided my house and Julian's calls. My phone, a silent weight in my pocket. The silence from my parents was deafening. I decoded the address and found Maya in a small, dilapidated cabin deep in the woods. When I told her everything, she didn't seem surprised. "He's been working on this for years," she said. "He knew he was running out of time." She explained that Elliot had been a whistleblower, exposing the Glint Research Corporation's unethical experiments. They were specifically targeting twins because of our unique connection. They believed they could break our bond to create a new kind of soldier, one that had no fear, no loyalty, no conscience. Maya led me to a hidden compartment in her cabin. Inside was a trove of documents and recordings. She gave me a USB drive, a mirror image of the one Elliot had given me. She showed me a black and white photo of another set of twins. Their heads were wrapped in wires, their faces expressionless. Underneath the photo was a chilling caption, "Subject A5 complete emotional fracture." Maya explained that this was what they wanted to do to Elliot. They saw him as broken because he resisted their control. He was the failure twin, while I was the perfect one, because I fit neatly into the life they designed for me. The truth hit me with a physical force. My parents hadn't loved us. They had studied us. My husband hadn't loved me. He had monitored me. My whole life was just a lab experiment. My anger was cold and precise. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to be another Subject A5. We had to find Elliot. Maya and I followed the secret satellite signal he had left behind, driving for hours through the night. The signal led us to an old abandoned factory in a remote area. The place was a ruin, a monument to a forgotten industry. But we found Elliot inside, huddled over a series of laptops. He was pale and exhausted, but his eyes were filled with a fierce determination. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I've uploaded the data. It's time for the world to know." He explained that he had stolen the complete files on Project Echo, including documents detailing even more horrifying experiments on orphaned children. We were standing on a razor's edge. At that very moment, a convoy of black SUVs pulled up outside. The front door burst open. A familiar voice echoed through the cavernous room. "Eleanor and Elliot, we just want the data. No one has to die tonight." Julian walked in, his face a mask of cold fury. This wasn't the man I had married. This was a soldier, a cold, calculating agent. He looked me in the eye. You could have had everything, Eleanor, a perfect life. Why did you have to ruin it? My voice was calm, a sharp contrast to the turmoil inside me, because my perfect life was a lie. Julian began to explain how he had orchestrated our entire relationship, from the places we met to the friends we made. He'd been manipulating me all along. Did you really think I loved you, Eleanor, or did you just need to be chosen? A gunshot rang out, not from Julian, but from the darkness behind us. Maya, who had been hiding, fired a warning shot. We ran. We ran until our lungs burned. Our legs ached. Until the sounds of the chase faded away. We had done it. The files were out. The truth was out. The fallout was swift and brutal. Julian and my parents were arrested. The Glint Research Corporation scandal became front-page news, shaking the political and business world to its core. My so-called perfect life was exposed for what it was, a sham. I filed for divorce from Julian, and I didn't take a dime. I had no family to go back to. My life, as I knew it, was a lie, but I didn't regret it. I didn't need a fake family or a false marriage. I didn't need a life bought with betrayal. I found my own purpose, a new life. Elliot and I didn't see each other often. We had to live in different places, in different identities, but we were connected in a way no one could ever understand. We were free. The quiet of my new life was a luxury I was still learning to appreciate. It wasn't the silence of a grave, nor the strained quiet of a lie. It was a comfortable, earned silence, broken only by the hum of my small office computer and the gentle patter of rain on the window pane. A year had passed since the Glint research scandal broke. A year since I had last seen Julian or my parents. The news cycles had moved on, but the ripple effects of Elliot's sacrifice were still unfolding. The Elliot Vance Foundation was no longer just a name. It was a reality, a small but growing beacon for others who had been manipulated and silenced by shadowy organizations. Sometimes, a memory would flicker into my mind without warning, as sharp and vivid as a photograph. I'd be in the middle of a meeting or signing a document, and suddenly, I would be transported back to a different time. I'd see Elliot and I, no older than 12, crouched in the musty darkness of our secret fort behind the old water tower. We had built it ourselves, a small, safe haven from the suffocating perfection of our home. We used to spend hours there, plotting rebellion against our parents' strict rules, sharing comic books, and dreaming of lives where we were in control. I remember the time Elliot got a black eye defending me from a schoolyard bully, then lied to our parents that he'd fallen off his bike. He looked at me afterward, his bruised face a masterpiece of defiance, and just smiled that crooked, triumphant smile of his. It was a small act of rebellion, but in our world, it felt like a revolution. That's what our whole life had been, a series of small, unrecorded acts of defiance, things only we knew about. Elliot was the one who saw the cracks first. I had been content in the gilded cage my parents had built for me, soothed by Julian's constant, practiced affection. I had been the perfect twin, the compliant one, the one who didn't ask questions. Elliot was the one who refused to be broken. He started with small things, a whispered word here, a curious question there, a knowing look that told me he saw through the facade. He was the artist, the free spirit, the one they wanted to fix. I realize now that they never understood our bond. They saw our twinship as a variable to be controlled, a weakness to be exploited. But it was our strength. The things we shared, the unspoken understanding. The parallel thoughts were more real than any of the lies they had constructed for us. My life now is a quiet tribute to that strength. The divorce from Julian was mercifully swift. I didn't want a single penny. I just wanted my freedom. I let go of the house, the car, the entire perfect life they had built for me. It felt like shedding a skin that no longer fit. I moved into a modest apartment, the first home I had ever truly chosen for myself. There's a small, crooked coffee shop on the corner where I get my coffee every morning. The barista, an artist with blue streaks in her hair, always remembers my order. It's a simple thing, This small act of genuine connection, but it fills me with a joy I never knew was possible. Happiness, for me, is no longer a grand manufactured spectacle. It's in the quiet moments. It's in the sound of rain on the window, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, and the simple act of choosing my own path. I spend my days working with the foundation, helping people rebuild their lives after being victims of corporate overreach and exploitation. We help them get legal aid, find safe places to live, and connect them with people who truly understand what they've been through. It's a slow process, but it's meaningful. I'm no longer running from the past. I'm building something new, something that honors the brother who risked everything to give me back my life. I'm not just Eleanor anymore, the twin from that powerful family. I'm Eleanor, the founder, the survivor, the woman who gets to decide her own future. Little by little, one beautiful, ordinary day at a time.